You're listening to STP Radio.
Welcome back to STP Radio. I'm your host, Mike Lyles, and I'm so excited to conduct another interview with one of our upcoming speakers for our spring 2017 STPCon conference. In case you've not signed up yet, STPCon will be in Phoenix, Arizona from March the 14th through the 17th this year. And if you reach out to me, I can share you a discount code for your registration. Be sure to check out www.stpcon.com where you can learn more about the conference, our speakers, our special events, and our conference pricing. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Look for @SoftwareTestPro on both of these social networks. So let's meet our guest for today. Today we have Michael Hackett. Michael heads the training, consulting, and publishing division of LogiGear. Michael has over 24 years of experience with software engineering and testing in banking, securities, healthcare, and consumer electronics. He's a certified Scrum Master, and he holds a BS in engineering from Carnegie Mellon University. He's been a regular instructor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the Berkeley Extension, Hong Kong Technical University, University of Da Nang, and Hyo-Sin University, and Software Productivity Center in Vancouver. He has been a lot of places. He has trained teams in over 16 countries, and he has co-authored 2 books, Testing Applications on the Web and Global Software Test Automation. Welcome to the STP Radio Show, Michael.
Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you with us. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and how you got into testing?
How I got into testing. So I went to engineering school and finished engineering school and said, I don't want to be an engineer. So I actually started teaching. And then I thought, I don't want to teach. Maybe I'll go back to engineering. So I applied with this company to be an engineer that just kind of coincidentally, they were making educational products. They're making like big database management systems for universities with like 40,000 students. They were making these. This was back a long time ago before these things were so common, these learning management systems. And the only reason why they hired me is because I'd been a teacher, and they didn't want to hire me to write code. They wanted to hire me to work with the QA team because I knew the subject matter. So I knew what teachers did. I knew what happened in a classroom, and basically I got hired into testing without even trying. I was really looking to get kind of a junior level programmer job, but I got hired into testing and never left.
That's outstanding, and I think that happens to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And usually people that are in testing didn't really start there. They have experience in other areas, and really they transition to that role, and I think that really helps. It doesn't mean that if you started in testing and you've done testing only all your career that's a bad thing, but
right.
I think having those experiences working in development and working in teaching and other career roles, I think it really helps define a tester's background and help them be better in the role that they're in.
Yeah, agreed.
So you spoke with us at some previous conferences. The last conference we were at, we had a packed house in your workshop, and there was a lot of energy. A lot of folks really enjoyed and gave great feedback for what you were doing. And we're excited this time that you're going to be doing 2 workshops and a session with us. And your first workshop is called Move into DevOps, Experiences from the Real World on Continuous Testing. This workshop looks very interesting. I think a lot of organizations are struggling right now. Which path do I take? What do I do? I don't want to just be a waterfall shop anymore. Do I move into Agile? Do I look at DevOps? Do I do a combination of things? And I think that's the struggle a lot of companies are having right now is how do I get into that new, to keep up with technology, to keep up with the way the world is changing, and to stay aggressive. Can you tell us a little bit about what you hope to share with the attendees and what the main takeaways of this workshop will be?
Sure. So You brought up me doing this session the last time. The really interesting thing to me about doing this session back in Dallas in the fall was that people were in all different positions of DevOps. Some of them were just told that, okay, we're going to be DevOps and you have to do continuous testing, go do it, with no clue, and they really didn't know how to approach it. There were other teams that had these great tool chains, and they were using all these continuous integration tools and using these environments as a service, and they were really sophisticated in their practices of DevOps. But we're missing some of the foundation testing pieces. What I do in this workshop is explain what DevOps is. And I really think that there's a big misunderstanding about what DevOps is. People see these two circles, they usually see these circles with a circle of dev, a circle of ops, and a circle of QA, and there's an overlapping piece, and that's what DevOps is. But that's really misleading to what practices you have to do and what testers have to do and how testers can prepare for DevOps and what it really means for day-to-day work. It's not only, okay, collaborate more. It's not only, okay, talk to your ops teams more. There are things that you have to do with your current testing practices, fixing them, cleaning them up, to try to get on the road to DevOps. There are probably some things that you haven't done already in your testing practices that you're going to have to pick up in DevOps. And there's actually going to be some things that are going to make your life easier because we're DevOps. It's not only you have more work to do. So things that test teams have to do. A lot of teams have to clean up their automation. One thing about DevOps is everything that can be automated has to be automated. But a lot of teams have really bloated and slow regression suites that can take, I have this one client who it takes them 5 days to run their automated regression suites. They have giant regression suites and they use all these VMs and they use these client configurations and they use huge databases, and their regression is really bloated and slow. That'll never pass in DevOps. So one thing about DevOps is automation has to be lean and mean, not bloated and slow. So right. Test teams really have to clean up their act when it comes to the practices they already do. There are practices, like I've always been a functional tester. I was never a performance guy and I wasn't a security guy. But in DevOps, with this whole shift left idea, shift left has more to do with how people practice DevOps today than even those three overlapping circles, right? Shift left is taking tasks that might happen at the end of the development cycle and shifting them left earlier in the development cycle. So as a functional tester or as a QA team, the whole team together, I may have to run somebody else's performance tests. I may have to run somebody else's security tests with whatever security tools we're using, and I may have to wind up using doing platform testing a lot earlier than I normally did. So I'm going to have to either use a service, use environments as a service, or if it's a mobile app that I'm doing, I may have to use some mobile service where I can have all these virtual phones way earlier in the development cycle than at the end when I'm used to doing them. So I may have to take on testing tasks that I don't normally do and do them earlier in the testing cycle. And some benefits of DevOps is the whole ops part. In my line of work, working in consulting, I run into a lot of teams that really struggle with environments and they struggle with data, where their test environments are crap and when they get new builds, they're incomplete, they're missing things, or if it's a multifaceted product. That most products are these days, there could be one dev team that updates their work, but another dev team that doesn't update their work, and they're not synchronized, and the environment the builds break because of the environments rather than because of the code, the functional code. Yeah. DevOps fixes that stuff for us. It better be fixing that stuff for us. That the operations team uses tools like Docker and has containers, and we have cloud environments as a service, and we have all of these varieties of environment fixes that other teams will do for us. A really good part of this is it's not the test team's job to build and manage these environments and containers anymore. That's done by ops, and it can really make your whole entire testing process a whole lot easier to have these kind of environment problems taken care of for us.
I agree completely. And I think you said it right in that it requires preparation. It's like you don't wake up today. If you're going on a diet, you don't just wake up today and say, I'm eating healthy from here on out. You have to prepare and plan for what I'm going to do to be a DevOps shop, and what are the things that I need to get done in this transition period so that I can be ready to be a DevOps shop. And I think that's critical for organizations. And I really loved your point on environments. I've worked in organizations where I step into the organization and the first thing I do is look at environments, and I hear, we don't even know what environments we're using. I know I log into this machine. I don't know what the environment is. I don't know what the sizing is. And that's a struggle when they don't know. It's playing with unknowns. Right.
So, you brought up one thing about, it's a benefit to know what you're talking about and to be prepared. Right. So an interesting thing to me from the because I go and see a lot of organizations. I don't only work in one organization in a year and I only see what they're doing. I go to, a dozen companies in a year and I get to see what they're doing. So I get to see a lot of what's going on. And one thing that's really different about DevOps is I think people realized after, I think I can safely say the Agile fiasco, or like the Scrum butt world, where people said, oh my gosh, everybody's doing Agile. I can't hire anybody unless I say we're Agile. So guess what? Now we're Agile and we're doing Scrum. And they were doing these weird practices. Okay, we're going to stop writing test plans. We're going to stop writing requirements documents. And we're going to do releases every 3 weeks. And teams had no idea how to work in this. They weren't trained. They didn't know what was going on. Agile kind of attacked teams overnight. And I really often, I see in the program that there's still a lot of Agile workshops, even though we've been, Agile's been around for, since 2001. The Agile Manifesto was first signed in 2001. It's been around for 15 years. There's a lot of organizations that are still struggling with it because it was implemented so poorly. The great thing about DevOps is I think either one, teams have learned their lessons. Organizations have learned their lesson. Like, we better not jump into this like we did in Agile, and then things were wrecked for the next 5 years before we figured things out. And I think that they might be a bit scared with, okay, we're gonna start using Puppet. Nobody even in the company knows how Puppet works except that one ops guy. We better do this slow.
Right.
So I think people are approaching this differently than how teams started to implement Scrum. So it's great, and people need information. Teams need information about what the heck is DevOps and what is it going to mean to my dev team and what is it going to mean to my testing team. But they're doing it. I think they're doing it slower than they raced to do Scrum and Agile.
I agree, and I think, like you said, that the preparation and knowing what needs to be done early really helps. And it takes me to my next question for you, which is, you've ran in 4 marathons and a triathlon.
Oh yeah.
I can't even imagine the preparation and preliminary work that's involved to be able to sustain that effort.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how you got involved in this? And also, can you compare this preparation for these events to how testing organizations can be successful today?
Oh my gosh. That's a lot. Well, it's a slow preparation. It takes a long time, and if you try and jump into it too deep, you're going to get hurt. So I ran a lot, and then after a while, I decided, okay, well, I need a better goal than just going for a run before work or going for a run at lunchtime, and I decided I would try and start running marathons. And I've been pretty successful. So I've run in a bunch of marathons. So completing my first one was really a great thing. But it really does take a lot of practice. It takes scheduling. I was making calendars. I was like, okay, by week number 5, I'm going to be running, I don't remember what it is. By week number 5, I'm going to be running 15 miles. By week number 8, I'm going to be running, however many miles. And by week number 15 or whatever it is, I'm going to be running 20 miles. And then 2 weeks before the marathon, you have to change and you have to start tapering. And then actually, when I first started running marathons, it was a certain way that you prepared. And that all changed about, I don't know how long ago, it was about 10 years ago. Everybody could start running marathons. Like Oprah ran a marathon. The whole prep for running marathons has totally changed, where you run these shorter distances most of your running week, and then one day, like a Saturday or a Sunday, you run really long. You may run like 3 miles 4 or 5 days during the week, but then on Saturday you run 9 miles. And that's totally different than the way you prepped for marathons. Like the first time I ran a marathon was probably 25 years ago. So it's kind of like there was the waterfall way that was kind of the grind it out, work hard every day, and then all of a sudden marathon planning turned into agile and sprints, where you did these shorter bursts, and then these grueling runs. But just one day a week was a whole lot easier on my body to run. So I've never even thought about how marathon running is similar to software development, to testing, but oh my gosh, and the measurement. I honestly, I would keep calendars with how many miles and how many minutes and how much I ate, and it takes dedication and way more than I thought. I thought, I've run a lot. I've run for years. I'm just gonna prep for a month or 2, and then I can run a marathon. No. It takes like 6 months, even though I was already, running recreationally. It took like 6 months of focused, scheduled work to actually be able to run a marathon and finish.
No,
so
I love that.
Yeah,
I think that's a great comparison, and a great. I also like your waterfall versus agile, and how that people have changed along the way and how they handle situations. It's I've always heard, once someone can break the record, then everybody starts breaking the record. I think that's right. Yep. I think setting the path, people can see it can be done, and then they start doing it. And I think that applies to a lot of things, in our organizations. You've got another workshop called Test Case Design Intensive, Back to Basics. Right. And many organizations struggle with how to define their testing. Some people say don't write test cases. Some people say write them, but write them at this level. Right. And I think there's a struggle within organizations on whether or not, I'll step into an organization for the first time, the first month, first 90 days. And what I find is they'll say, well, this is how we write test cases. And then when you look at it, you feel it's not detailed enough, or it's not covering enough. It's not doing the right things. And I think this workshop did really well in the past, and would love to hear about what you think you hope that the audience gets from this workshop as well.
Well, okay, before I talk about what I hope they get, I have to talk about what happened the last time. So I went in before to prepare, get the machine set up, and as it's getting closer to time, the room is filling up, and I really thought there were going to be more people at the DevOps, but there weren't. The room was full for this test case. I mean, it wasn't 100%, but it was packed for this test case intensive. Right. And once it started, I asked people. I said, "Okay, are you all new? Is everybody here new to testing?" And it turned out like 75% of the class of the people there had been in testing for maybe 8-10 years. Right. And it just shocked me who showed up. What I found out is they'd never taken a class in writing test cases. They just had kind of been winging it the whole time. Even people who'd been in testing for 10 years. And there were a handful of new people. And this, I have to say, the session is geared toward everybody, because I start with basics, but then I get into much more sophisticated ways for how we can write test cases and design test cases in this lean and agile world, which is just demanding that everything is a lot faster. So I was really surprised at how many questions people had about how do you write good test cases, what test cases get written, what don't get written, when do you write test cases, when do you not, that I actually spent more time talking about the whole idea of test cases than the mechanics, which I thought the mechanics of writing a test case was going to be the biggest part. The mechanics of designing a test case and designing good test data was going to be the biggest session, and I kind of had to. I was agile as I was doing this. I kind of winged it on the fly and just shifted some of the topics for the people who were there to answer all the questions people had, and I'm redesigning the material a bit now to kind of get everybody on the same page faster of we all need to learn how to write test cases. You need to take this information, bring it back to your organization, and do a mini workshop of your own to get everybody not only understanding the basics of how to write good test cases, but so that everybody can be on the same field. Everybody can be on a level playing field for this is how this organization, these are a couple of ways in which this organization can write good test cases. So
I agree. I think having that consistency across the organization, knowing what you're expecting there and knowing what the organization is expecting, really is a clarifying moment for the teams. I've seen so many organizations and so many teams that I've worked with struggle with, well, my team writes them this way, my team writes them this way, and there's bits and pieces on each of them that are good, and then there's bits and pieces that just don't match. And I think I love this. I love this class. I think you got outstanding feedback on this class and high ratings because I think people, to your point, it doesn't matter how many years you've been doing test case design or planning for testing. This really kind of sets the tone for I can learn this and then I can take it back to my organization.
Right. Well, thank you for saying that. We talked about a couple of syntaxes for how you write tests, and there were people who'd been testing for 10 years or more who said I've never even thought of a general syntax that people could use to write test cases in a common way across a team. It just never occurred to them. They were just kind of winging it on how they wrote tests, or worse, just regurgitating back what the requirement says. The requirement says you can have 10 concurrent sessions. So you write a test case, test that you can have 10 concurrent sessions. What a waste. Yeah. What a waste.
Oh, yes.
And I mentioned Agile and Lean. Agile really did shift how people are supposed to write tests. There could be people, an Agile purist could argue with me, there's no such thing as test cases. If you come up with a test, it becomes acceptance criteria.
Yeah.
Well, I would agree with that, and I would argue in favor of that until you get into some organization or some particularly bigger enterprises where there's big test case databases and there's traceability, and you need to pull metrics off of test cases, and people are measuring you by test case execution. There's still a whole lot of big software development and software testing organizations around that aren't just 6 or 7 people on a Scrum team, where the production of test cases is really essential. And there are a lot of times when you have to write test cases to make sure the tests are getting executed correctly, and to get the tests out of your head and onto a piece of paper, or into a repository, so that you can leave the team. You can get promoted. You can go work on a cooler product. You can go do something else, and not take all of that brain power on how you effectively test this product with you. You have to leave that for the team. You have to leave the business intelligence with the team. Well, test cases is the best way to do that when you go on and work in a different part of the organization.
Well, now that's when you have an organization close to you, and I think a lot of organizations are starting to. And when I say starting to, it's probably been years that we've expanded. I remember 20 years ago in development, and 15 years ago when I got into testing, everybody was right there. So it's everybody right there in the same room as me, and we've moved to teams all over the place. I'm working with an organization right now that we've got teams in 4 different countries right now.
Right.
And you've trained software teams in 16 countries. You've seen the differences in cultures and how the different teams work. And it kind of leads me to your session called Case Study for the 21st Century. building a mobile and IoT development and test lab for offshore testing teams.
Yeah.
And I know many teams are going to relate to this because a lot of organizations are using on-site offshore or on-site nearshore teams. What is the message that you hope to convey here in this session, and what you hope to be the main takeaways?
Okay, so I'm going to take a step back from what you just said, and on the last topic. So I'm in Silicon Valley, and I did this consulting job with a company in San Jose, where we had teams in San Jose, we had teams in Beijing, we had teams in Bangalore, India, and we had teams in Bucharest, Romania. We never had a meeting that everybody attended because at least one team was sleeping while the rest of us were working. At least one team was sleeping. Most of the time, 2 or 3 teams were sleeping while the others were working. So we needed a way to work together. So on the last topic, that's the first time I used a test case manager, that everybody had to work in one tool and everybody had to be entering their test cases into this one tool, because we had no idea what the other teams were doing. We never had we didn't have daily stand-ups back then, but we used our test cases as a communication tool. So this offshoring thing has been around for a while. And that's one of the things I talk about in the test case workshop, that you may not see the people who are executing your tests. They may be in an offshore location or even in a remote office inside the US where writing good test cases is essential. So back on to this next topic of building this lab. So one of the things with having offshore teams, it's so many people have offshore teams these days, is we need knowledge transfer. You have to take the skills in your office, whether it's testing skill, technical skill, domain expertise, to your industry, and transfer that somehow to the offshore organization. And this model of taking one of the ways that I wound up training people in 16 countries is Silicon Valley companies, mainly Silicon Valley companies, would hire me, or American companies would hire me and say, okay, you've got to go to Bangalore, you've got to go to Pune, you've got to go to Moscow, you've got to go to Ireland, you've got to go to our team in Mexico and teach them how to test, or show them how to test our app. Yeah. And send me for a couple of weeks somewhere. And, I would have these big sessions with teams. It worked well for what it was. And it was back when offshoring was new. I did a lot of work with new offshore organizations, as well as companies in the US that were new to offshoring. But we've been offshoring for, 20, 30 years, more than that, but would have been doing it a lot for probably the last 20 years. At least in Silicon Valley, we've been doing it a lot for 20 years. And the idea that you're just going to pick somebody up and go plop them in another office, when many of these teams have some amount of technical knowledge, or they know some of the things that they should be doing, to go and have the home office tell them, we're the home office, so you have to do what we do. And this is how you do it. That actually doesn't work culturally anymore. The teams offshore have become more sophisticated, and they don't want to be talked at by the home office, or dictated to by the home office. And this is actually a big shift that some American companies have not adjusted to yet, where they think, well, we're the main office, so they just have to do what we do, and are having problems with staff retention in their offshore offices as a result. So one of the things that we did in our company was we're thinking, okay, the world is getting more mobile. People are doing APIs and web services for everything. How are we going to transfer this knowledge to these teams that are so busy doing the work that we need them to do this work, but how can we have them technically advance? Where at least at home in the U.S. offices, it's a lot easier to go take a class at night, or go do a bunch of webinars, or just go and do a little research project on your own. But that is not the culture in a lot of organizations. In a lot of countries, that's not the culture to go and, go pay for a class on your own at night or on weekends after you finished university. The company provides all the training. So to solve a whole bunch of these problems for us, we in LogiGear decided we're going to build an R&D lab. We're going to build an R&D lab, and we did one really unique thing, is we let the offshore team run it. We gave them some guidance. We said, okay, we want you, for example, we want you to learn about web services. We want you to learn how to code web services and how to test web services. So rather than me developing some PowerPoint training class on how you test web services or how you code web services, we just gave them a project and said, okay, go pick a bunch of web services and code it, and then go test it. And then, just report back, do a demo for us, demo the product that you integrated some web services for.
Right.
And we wound up having some really interesting results. The teams loved learning on their own. They thought it was a whole lot of fun. It was totally self-directed. So they really enjoyed that part, rather than, they had ownership of it rather than an outside group saying, here's what you have to do, step 1, step 2, step 3, go do this. The interesting thing for us is that they really went on their own path and didn't they took what we said, but then they really ran with it, and they ran in directions that we didn't expect. Like, for example, we said, okay, go implement a couple of these web services, and they did like 3 times as many as we thought, because it was fun to do, it was new, it was exciting, but didn't really focus on the testing part. It was much more exciting to get Google Maps to work or get Yelp to work, but not testing Yelp or testing Google Maps. So it was really interesting to see what people were interested in, how they learned, what they learned. And one other thing that we did is we made them responsible for doing the knowledge transfer with the rest of the team. So the R&D team in the offshore office, they had to take it and then run with it to the rest of the organization. And the U.S. side really stepped back from this. And from my experience, this is a huge departure for U.S.-based teams to step back from dictating, here's what you do, and just say, here, go have fun and do this on your own.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think the attendees to our conference, particularly this conference, love case studies. And I think this is going to be one where you can share the experience. Folks can take back to their organization what you've learned and what you've done. And I think it's going to be a great session where folks can learn a lot and use it immediately when they get back to their organization.
I hope so. Yeah.
So Michael, I have one final question for you, and that is, what are you looking forward to for STPCon this time? And what is the one thing that you hope to either attend or be part of, or just overall the conference in general? What's the one thing you're hoping that you get to accomplish there when you're here next month?
Well, I see a couple of conference sessions on like quality in the digital age and the new QA role and value, 2 separate sessions by Ann Hungate that talk about how testing and quality have changed. And I absolutely believe what she's saying, that testing and quality have changed. And I think a lot of organizations aren't ready for how it's changed. And yes. I want to see her ideas on this. I was just working with this one organization on continuous deployment, continuous delivery, and the test team was almost cut out of the discussion. And they were like, how can you do this? How can you say, the whole organization owns quality, and the focus is on the developers running unit tests and qualifying builds, and then there's some practices that they're doing that have about quality that have nothing to do with the test team. And the testers were kind of shocked, and I was saying, where have you been? Where have you not known that how have you not seen the quality really is dispersed through the whole organization, and you don't own quality. Right. You absolutely contribute, and you may be the main contributors, but to the idea that you are the gatekeepers to quality, it's not 1995 anymore. It's 2016, right. And you need to, get on board with this whole new vision of quality. And I think that some organizations haven't caught on to this new understanding of quality, but I'm more concerned with test teams who are going to get lost by this, who may not realize that the quality ship has left, and if the testers don't get on board, they're going to be an afterthought.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking forward to a couple of sessions on this new understanding of quality in the DevOps world, quality in the digital age, and how test teams are going to react.
Well, you have picked an outstanding workshop and session to look at with Ann Hungate. I know her very well, and I've spoken to her about these topics, and you're exactly right. She's on point for where organizations are going. She is led in a senior leadership role there. I think folks are really, really going to enjoy this conference because with your workshops and sessions, with Ann's, and also with just the others that are there, I feel through my many years of being with STPCon, this is going to outstandingly be the best one that we've had. And I'm just so excited about what we're going to do. Yeah,
so am I.
So, Michael, thank you so much for your time today. We're really looking forward to seeing you in Phoenix in March. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us what you're presenting at the conference.
You're welcome, Mike. This has been great. I felt a couple of times like I was teaching, like I was in the middle of, I was in the middle of my session. So thank you for having me today.
I feel your energy, and I really think the audience is going to love this podcast as well as your sessions. And I look forward to seeing everyone at the next conference. And this concludes our next episode of STP Radio. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes with more speakers coming soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of STP Radio, and stay tuned for more episodes. Learn more about the conference being held in Phoenix, Arizona, March 14th through 17th by visiting stpcon.com.